The sun had sunk behind the jagged hills, leaving the gravel road slick with the last of a cold drizzle. The old truck sat at the edge of Miller's field, paint blistered, tires half buried in mud. K9, a German shepherd with eyes too knowing for his age, pawed and scratched at the driver's side door, whining under his breath. Jacob leaned against the hood, his hands trembling, breath visible in the cold evening air. He had driven this road 1,000 times, yet tonight, every shadow seemed to whisper a warning. Something inside that truck, he just knew, was waiting to be found. And hey, if you enjoy tension like this, you might like to follow for more stories that dig under the skin of small-town secrets. The rain had stopped, but the ground still squelched under Jacob's boots as he approached the truck. The tires sank slightly into the soft mud, and each step left a deep impression, like a mark he couldn't erase. K9 circled the vehicle, ears pinned back, tail stiff, his low growl vibrating in Jacob's chest. The air smelled of wet earth, diesel, and something faintly metallic that made Jacob's stomach twist. Jacob crouched beside the dog, trying to calm him, but the animal's focus never wavered. K9 pawed the door, scratching at the peeling paint, whining like he wanted to tear the metal open with his teeth. Jacob swallowed. He had to admit, he didn't know why the dog was so agitated. It was just an old truck. Or maybe it wasn't. "Come on, buddy," Jacob said, voice low, more to steady himself than to soothe K9. "It's just a truck." But the dog's reaction was unsettling, almost human in its insistence. K9 darted from one side of the vehicle to the other, nose to the ground, then back to the door. Jacob felt the hair on his neck rise. The truck had belonged to his uncle, a man Jacob barely knew. Uncle Frank had been a quiet, bitter figure, the kind of man who left more questions than memories. He'd vanished 3 years ago, leaving the truck behind on a muddy patch of land no one cared about. Everyone assumed Frank had moved, or worse, that he'd finally drunk himself into a grave. But Jacob had a knack for noticing things other people overlooked. He squatted and wiped the mud from the door handle. There were scratches, old ones, but also new, shallow ones, almost deliberate. K9 pawed harder, whining. Jacob's fingers shook as he gripped the handle. The lock was old and stiff. He hesitated, heart pounding, as if pulling that latch might break more than metal. The night pressing around him. Crickets chirped in fits, a distant owl hooted, and the wind whispered through the skeletal branches of a dead oak nearby. The field was empty, silent, except for the squelch of mud and K9's uneasy growl. Finally, with a deep breath, Jacob twisted the handle. The door groaned like it had been holding its breath for years. K9 barked sharply, back stiffened, as if bracing for something unseen. The smell hit him first, a mixture of mildew, rust, and something faintly coppery. Blood? Jacob shook his head, trying to dismiss the thought. Inside, the truck was a capsule of neglect. Dust coated the dashboard like ash, and broken cigarette butts littered the floor. Rainwater had seeped through the cracked windshield, pooling in the worn rubber mats. But what caught Jacob's attention was the glove compartment. He hadn't noticed it before. Perhaps it had been hidden, or maybe he just never cared. Now, it seemed to pulse with promise, a small, waiting secret. K9 barked again, a single, urgent sound. Jacob hesitated, fingers trembling over the latch. Slowly, he opened it. Inside lay a small leather-bound notebook, its edges yellowed, pages curling like old leaves. Jacob picked it up, and the smell of ink and dust filled his nose. He opened the first page and froze. The handwriting was neat, precise, almost obsessive. But it wasn't just writing, it was confessional. Names, dates, accusations. Jacob recognized them immediately. Neighbors, local lawmen, even his own family. His stomach turned. And then he saw the final line on the page he opened first. "If you're reading this, the pieces are in your hands. Don't trust him. Not anyone." Jacob's hand shook so badly that he almost dropped the notebook. K9 pawed at his leg, whining, as if urging him to move faster, to understand sooner. A rustle behind the truck made Jacob whip around. Nothing, just the wind or a shadow stretching longer than it should. He forced himself to breathe evenly, ignoring the sudden tightness in his chest. "Uncle Frank," he muttered, half to himself, half in disbelief. "What the hell were you mixed up in?" K9 pressed closer to him, ears alert, eyes glinting in the moonlight. There was a tension in the dog, an almost palpable fear. And Jacob realized it wasn't just a notebook. Something else was here. Something waiting. Something that hadn't wanted to be discovered. He flipped through the pages, scanning entries about strange disappearances, late-night visitors, and mentions an object everyone had been searching for. The notebook chronicled events Jacob didn't fully understand yet, but one thing became clear. The truck, the glove compartment, and even K9's insistence weren't random. They were all connected to a larger, darker truth. A sudden snap of a twig behind him made Jacob jump. K9 lunged, barking into the darkness. Jacob swung the flashlight in a wide arc. Nothing, just the shadows stretching between the trees. The field empty. He turned back to the truck. The notebook trembled in his hands. A photograph slipped out from between the pages, falling to the muddy ground. Jacob bent down and picked it up. It was a picture of the old mill on the edge of town, abandoned, rotting, its windows like hollow eyes. But someone had been inside recently. A shadow moved in the photo, blurry but undeniably human, and scribbled across the bottom, in the same neat handwriting. He saw too much. Jacob swallowed. Cold sweat slicked his back. His fingers tightened on the notebook. K9 pressed against his leg, growling low now, a sound that made the hair on Jacob's arm stand on end. He realized the dog had known. K9 had sensed something in the truck that Jacob hadn't yet. Something that wasn't just part of a story, a rumor, or an old family secret. Something alive, or at least something that could hurt. And then the whisper came, faint, almost imperceptible, carried by the wind to the dead field. "Don't look, don't touch." Jacob froze. The sound was so soft he could have imagined it. But K9 barked again, sharper, urgent, warning him. Jacob's mind raced. Someone or something was aware he was here, watching, waiting. The notebook felt heavier in his hands, laden with expectation, accusation, and perhaps guilt. He didn't know if he was holding a key or a curse. He looked at the truck again. Its rusted, blistered body suddenly seemed less like an abandoned vehicle and more like a sentinel, guarding secrets it had carried for decades. Secrets about betrayal, lies, and perhaps death. Jacob closed the glove compartment slowly, careful not to disturb whatever else might be inside. He slid the notebook into his jacket. K9 calmed slightly but refused to leave the side of the truck. Jacob realized then that his life had changed. He wasn't just revisiting an old vehicle. He was stepping into a story someone had wanted hidden. And K9, stubborn, relentless, had dragged him to the threshold. He glanced back at the field, half expecting movement. Nothing, but the uneasy feeling persisted. The notebook pulsed in his pocket, as if it had its own heartbeat. And somewhere deep in the darkness, Jacob felt that the eyes of the past were on him. A cold wind whispered across the field, carrying with a promise. Once you start, there's no turning back. Jacob took a deep breath, tightened his jacket, and started to walk back toward town, K9 at his side. The truck stood behind him, silent, brooding, waiting for the next piece of the puzzle to be uncovered. And Jacob knew one thing. Someone didn't want that puzzle solved. The next morning, the sky hung low and gray, draping the small town of Cedar Creek in a dull, oppressive light. Jacob walked down Main Street with K9 at his side, the notebook heavy in his jacket pocket. Every few steps, he felt the weight of unseen eyes. The town had a sleepy charm, porch swings, faded signs, the occasional dog barking, but beneath it, there was a sense that everyone carried secrets. Jacob's first stop was a local diner, a place with cracked vinyl booze and a lingering scent of burnt coffee. The bell above the door jingled as he entered. "Morning, Jacob," called Marcy, the waitress, polishing the glass with a rag that had seen better decades. "You look like you haven't slept in a week." Jacob forced a smile, sliding into a booth. "Something like that," he said, glancing down at K9, who lay calmly at his feet, but ears twitching. Marcy frowned, studying him. "Still poking around that old truck, huh? Folks say it's cursed." Even old man Wilkes didn't touch it for years before he disappeared. Jacob stiffened. Disappeared? He asked cautiously. Marcy shrugged, tossing the rag onto the counter. No one knows. Just gone one night. Truck stayed there, rotting. People avoided it. But you've got the dog with you, so maybe you're brave or foolish. Jacob didn't answer, taking a slow sip of bitter coffee. The notebook burned under his jacket, a reminder that Marcy's casual gossip might be closer to truth than she knew. He left the diner before anyone else arrived, the tension in his chest coiling tighter with each step. K9 sniffed the air, pulling slightly on the leash, alert to a scent Jacob couldn't identify. The mill lay at the edge of town, abandoned for decades, its windows shattered, roof sagging. Local kids whispered that the place was haunted, that shadows moved in the darkness, and that the floorboards would swallow anyone who stepped inside. But Jacob had seen the photo in the notebook, the one with the blurred human silhouette, and he knew the mill was a clue. He parked his car at a distance and approached on foot, K9 padding silently beside him. Rusted machinery loomed through the broken windows, and the air smelled of mold, wetwood, and something sharper, something chemical. Jacob pushed the door open. It groaned on its hinges, echoing through the empty interior. Sunlight cut through the broken panes, casting jagged patterns on the floor. Dust motes danced in the air like restless spirits. "Hello." Jacob's voice was a whisper, swallowed by the cavernous space. No answer. K9 stopped suddenly, nose to the ground, growling low. His hackles rose, and Jacob felt the first real spike of fear. The dog's instincts had never been wrong. They moved deeper inside. Rusted beams hung overhead, and the smell of decay grew stronger. Jacob's flashlight cut through the shadows, illuminating old conveyor belts, stacks of barrels, and torn tarps. And then he found it, a doorway at the back, partially hidden behind a stack of rotting crates. It wasn't locked, but the air coming from within smelled different, cleaner, intentional. K9 hesitated at the threshold. Jacob knelt, letting the dog sniff the space before stepping in. The room was small, square, with walls lined with shelves. On one of them lay objects wrapped in cloth, a rusted revolver, a stack of yellowed newspapers, and finally, a small metal box. Jacob's fingers shook as he opened the box. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, showing people he recognized from the notebook, neighbors, local officials, friends he'd grown up with. But the photos weren't ordinary. They were taken secretly, capturing moments of weakness, betrayal, and hidden sins. A shiver ran down Jacob's spine. Someone had been watching Cedar Creek for years. Someone who knew every secret. And Uncle Frank, Jacob realized with a sinking feeling, Uncle Frank hadn't disappeared. He had been collecting evidence. A sound behind him made him spin around. Footsteps, deliberate, careful, not random. K9 growled, baring his teeth, muscles coiled like springs. Jacob. A voice called softly, almost mockingly. He froze. It was familiar, too familiar. Out of the shadows stepped David Wilkes. Uncle Frank's son, tall, lean, face pale, eyes sharp. But there was something darker there, a hardness that Jacob didn't remember from childhood. "I wondered how long it would take you to find this place," David said. Jacob swallowed. You're alive," he said cautiously. Everyone said. David shrugged. Everyone likes to assume things about people they don't understand. But you, he smiled thinly, eyes narrowing. You always ask too many questions. K9 growled, low in warning. David's expression softened momentarily as he looked at the dog. He's smart, David said. Better than most humans. Jacob's mind raced. Why are you here? What is all this? He gestured to the photographs, the notebook, the metal box. David's eyes flicked to the items, then back to Jacob. It's all connected. My father, he saw things people in this town buried. He tried to protect the truth. But the truth, it's dangerous. And now, his gaze darkened. It's your turn. Jacob's heart thumped. My turn for what? David stepped closer. To choose. Will you follow the path he started, or will you leave it buried? Because someone is still watching. Someone who doesn't want the puzzle solved. The hairs on Jacob's arms stood on end. He glanced at K9, who growled, nose twitching to a shadow in the far corner. Jacob followed the dog's gaze and froze. A figure lurked there, barely visible. Not fully human, at least not in demeanor. Watching, waiting. "Who's that?" Jacob whispered. David's jaw tightened. "You'll find out soon enough. But first, you need to understand your father's mistakes. And your uncle's death, it wasn't what everyone thinks." Jacob's stomach turned. "Frank dead?" David's nod was slow, deliberate. He tried to stop it. "But some people you trust, have their own agendas. People who would kill to keep the truth hidden." A metallic click echoed across the room. Jacob spun. Someone had triggered a hidden trap. A barrel tipped over, spilling contents across the floor. Documents, wires, even more photographs. One fluttered to a stop at Jacob's feet. He bent down and recognized the handwriting immediately. It was Uncle Frank's. The note read, "If they catch you with this, it's not just your life. They will come for everyone you care about." Jacob's hand shook violently. K9 pressed against him, growling, ready to attack. David stepped back, his face pale but resolute. "I didn't want you to see this," he said softly, "but it's too late. They know someone's poking around, and they won't wait." A sudden crash upstairs made both men spin. Dust fell from the ceiling, and Jacob realized the old mill had more secrets than he'd imagined. Hidden floors, crawl spaces, ways to move unseen. David's voice broke the tense silence. "You're not alone, Jacob, but you can't trust anyone. Not yet. And whatever you do, don't look behind the walls." Jacob swallowed, mind racing. His fingers clutched the notebook, the photos, the metal box. He realized, with a deep, gnawing fear, that K9 had led him here for a reason. The dog's instincts had sensed the danger long before he had. Outside, the wind rattled broken panes, carrying whispers to the mill, secrets that refused to stay buried, truths that demanded exposure, and a warning. The past has teeth, and it bites hardest when you least expect it. Jacob's heart pounded. He had uncovered a fragment of the truth, but the larger puzzle loomed threatening, alive, waiting. And someone in Cedar Creek, someone who had been watching every move, was about to make their presence known. The notebook pulsed in his pocket, heavy with expectations, warnings, and sins yet to be revealed. Jacob realized that the night at the truck was only the beginning, and K9, unwavering, stayed at his side, ready to face whatever was coming. Jacob looked at David at the shadow corners of the mill and whispered under his breath, "I don't know if I'm ready, but I have to see it through." The wind howled outside, carrying the promise of chaos, betrayal, and revelations that could unravel everything. Night had fallen over Cedar Creek again, heavier than before, suffocating, pressing down on the town like a living thing. Jacob parked at the edge of Miller's Field, K9 beside him, ears twitching, alert. The truck waited, rusted and silent, a sentinel holding secrets. The notebook, photographs, and metal box were tucked into his jacket, but he could feel their weight in every step. The wind whispered across the field, stirring the remnants of rain-soaked leaves, and somewhere in the shadows of the trees, something moved. Jacob's pulse spiked. He wasn't sure if it was memory, fear, or instinct, but the tension in his chest was unmistakable. He approached the truck, K9 at his side, nails clicking against the cracked asphalt. Jacob's hands were steady, but his mind raced. The notebook had led him here. David had warned him, and now every decision carried consequences he couldn't fully measure. K9 jumped, pawing frantically at the driver's side door. Jacob crouched beside him, fingers brushing the peeling paint. The dog's growl was low and menacing, throat vibrating with warning. Jacob swallowed, tightened his grip on the handle, and opened the door. Inside, the truck smelled of rust, wet earth, and faint copper. Jacob slid the notebook into the seat beside him and reached for the glove compartment. His hands trembled as he opened it. The metal box sat there, innocuous, but pulsating with the tension of secrets it held. K9 barked sharply. Jacob froze. Something, or someone, was moving in the field behind the truck. Shadows stretched unnaturally, twisting in the dim light of the moon. He lifted the box, and as he did, a figure emerged from behind the trees, David. But there was another, a man Jacob recognized immediately. Sheriff Lawson, the town's lawman, eyes narrowed, lips tight, holding a rifle. "You should have stayed out of it," Lawson said, voice flat, calm, but cold. "Some secrets aren't meant to be found." Jacob's mind raced. "Lawson, why?" Lawson's expression didn't waver. "Frank found out too much. People get messy when the past comes out. I'm cleaning it up." K9 growled, hackles raised. The dog had never been wrong. Jacob realized the danger wasn't just in the notebook, the mill, or the truck. It was here, human, calculated. David stepped forward, hands raised. "You can't do this. He doesn't know anything yet. The town, the people who are responsible, they'll cover up anything, kill anyone." Lawson's finger twitched near the trigger. "I've been waiting for this day. You, Wilkes, and anyone else sticking their noses where they don't belong." Jacob's chest tightened. He had to act fast. Slowly, deliberately, he placed a metal box on the truck hood, snapping it open. Inside, small vials, documents, and a single object wrapped in black cloth. Jacob unwrapped it. It was a key, small, tarnished, but unmistakably important. "The key," David whispered. "That's the missing piece. Without it," his voice faltered, "we never know who really did it." Jacob's mind raced. He realized this key was a pivot of all the secrets, the evidence that could reveal the true story of Uncle Frank, the disappearances, the fire, and the corruption hiding beneath Cedar Creek's sleepy facade. Lawson's eyes flicked to it. "Where did you get that?" he demanded, stepping closer. Jacob's hand tightened around the notebook. "It's mine now," he said, voice steady despite the fear. "I'm finishing what Frank started." Lawson sneered, raising the rifle. But K9 leapt, teeth bared, knocking the gun aside. In the chaos, David lunged, grabbing Lawson's arm, twisting it, and sending the sheriff sprawling into the mud. The three men struggled, tension snapping in the cold night air. Finally, Lawson broke free, running into the shadows, a curse echoing after him. Jacob's chest heaved, heart hammering, adrenaline surging. But the threat had gone, for now. Silence settled over the field. K9 dropped to the ground, panting, eyes still scanning for movement. Jacob sank into the driver's seat, key in hand, notebook on his lap. David stood nearby, face pale, chest rising and falling, exhausted. "Why?" Jacob finally asked. "Why hide all this? Why kill, cover up, betray?" David's voice was low, trembling. "Power. Fear. People in this town, they'd rather see others die than face the truth. My father, Frank, they try to fight it. That's why they're gone." Jacob felt rage and sorrow twisting inside him. The betrayal wasn't just a trust. It was of humanity. Friends, neighbors, even his family, all part of a web of lies, greed, and fear. He slid the key into his pocket. "Then we expose it," he said. "All of it. The notebook, the photos, the key, everything." David hesitated. "It won't be easy. They'll come after you." "Me? K9. Jacob nodded. "I know, but it has to be done. For Frank, for the truth, for everyone they tried to bury." K9 leaned against him, steady, loyal, understanding the gravity of the moment. Jacob reached down, scratching behind the dog's ears. "We do this together, buddy," he whispered. The first light of dawn broke across the field, casting a muted glow on the old truck, the metal box, and the notebook. Cedar Creek stirred awake, unaware that its darkest secrets were about to surface. Jacob felt a weight lift slightly, a mixture of relief and dread. He had faced fear, betrayal, and the threat of death, but now he had the missing piece, the key to the truth. And sometimes, truth was the only weapon strong enough to shatter lies. David exhaled, the tension leaving his body in a slow, shuddering release. "I didn't think anyone would come this far," he admitted. "Not even you." Jacob looked at him, then at K9, then back at the truck. "We didn't have a choice. Some things, they find you, whether you're ready or not. Uncle Frank's story, it's ours now to finish." For a long moment, they simply stood there, the wind whispering through the trees, K9's steady presence a grounding force. The threat was gone, for now, but the emotional weight of betrayal, loss, and hard-won truth lingered. Jacob finally closed a notebook, sliding it into his jacket. He pocketed the key and cast a last glance at the truck. It had been a silent witness, a keeper of secrets, a harbinger of both fear and revelation. And now, its purpose had been fulfilled. He turned to David. "Let's go. We have work to do." David nodded, a faint smile crossing his face. "Yeah, let's finish it." As they walked away, K9 at their side, Jacob felt the quiet resolve settle over him. Cedar Creek would wake the sun, as it always did, unaware that the past had finally been faced, the missing pieces found, and the truth, painful, dangerous, but undeniably real, was finally set free. The old truck stood behind them, silent, fading into morning haze, its secrets no longer buried, its purpose complete. And for the first time, Jacob allowed himself to hope, not for peace, not for safety, but for the satisfaction that comes from doing what's right, even when it's the hardest path to take. And K9 padded faithfully beside him, a quiet reminder that loyalty, instinct, and courage could uncover truths no human alone could face. The field was empty now, but the story would ripple through Cedar Creek for years to come, a reminder that darkness could hide in plain sight, but the right people at the right time could always bring it to light.